Welcome to this episode of To the Contrary podcast. I am Charlie Sykes. We actually have two guests today who probably need no introduction, although I'm going to introduce them anyway. You know Amy McGrath, by the way. Amy, I'm reading your biog and feeling inadequate with every sentence.
Come on.
I think people recognize Amy, former Marine fighter pilot, former political candidate from Kentucky. Amy was the first woman to fly a combat mission for the Marine Corps, as well as the first to fly the FA-18 on a combat mission. And during her 20 years of service in the Marine Corps, Amy flew 89 combat missions against Al-Qaeda and the Taliban. And, of course, was the Democratic nominee for Senate in Kentucky in 2020. And then there, of course, is Denver Riggleman, who is no stranger to this podcast, or the predecessors of this podcast. I think of it as kind of a continuation. Former congressman, and staffer for the January 6th committee. So, Amy and Denver, thank you for joining me. I appreciate it very much.
Yeah, great to be with you.
Well, first off, let's get some business done, because you two have gotten together and are putting out your own podcast, because that's what the world needs. It needs another podcast. It needs more podcasts. And it debuted a week ago. We're a little bit behind the curve here, and it's called, Denver, what is it called?
It is called Truth in the Barrel. And I just want to say, Charlie, it's all Amy's fault. Amy is in Kentucky. She's in Bourbon County. She knew that I made bourbon, and she called me because she said she needed somebody who exuded this incredible physical attraction across all platforms. So she called me, Charlie, right, and said, "Hey, Denver, would you join me in this Truth in the Barrel, this Truth in the Barrel podcast and show?" So, Charlie, I just want to say, Charlie, it is Amy did call me. I just want everybody to know that.
In all seriousness,
So it's a bourbon thing, yeah.
Well, the theme is surrounding whiskey, because let's face it, we need some bourbon and whiskey to get through what we're all going through right now. But really, it's Denver and I are just Americans who served our country. And, he's center right, I'm center left. And we come at things with different perspectives, man, woman, but we also believe in our country and believe in our democracy. And I feel like right now there is a place to just tell the truth about what's going on for people. So that's why we're doing it.
Well, and there is so much going on. Amy, I want to talk to you about a lot of the national security implications of what's happening right now. But Denver, I want to start with this, because I'm a little obsessed by a story that may have, maybe under some people's radar screen, but which I think resonates with us. That during one of his photo ops in the Oval Office, Donald Trump, the president of the United States, took time to order a legal investigation, order actual government retaliation against somebody you and I both know, Chris Krebs. And a little background, Chris Krebs headed the agency that was supposed to protect the country from cyber attacks, including attacks on the election. And Chris is very, very well respected. He did his job so well that the 2020 election was free, fair, and secure. And he said so. And Donald Trump has never forgiven him for that. Fired him by tweet for saying, "Hey, we did good. The 2020 election, fair, free, secure." And apparently he has been stewing for years. So this week, while he is tanking the world economy by whim, he takes time out to strip Chris Krebs of his security clearance, which is not the important thing, and then tells the Justice Department, basically, find something that we can charge. It's just, give me your sense, Denver, the obsessiveness of the retribution campaign of this president.
For me, I got one of those preemptive pardons from Joe Biden, which I think Trump's trying to nullify, Charlie, right? Yep, I did. So you are talking to a pardoned individual here, Charlie. So I know that's...
What did you get pardoned for? What did you do?
Biden did the preemptive pardons for us because I guess they thought Trump would, actually try to, enact some retribution against us. And guess what he just did? He just did that on Chris Krebs and Miles Taylor. And I think when we started this podcast, and Charlie, and I'm not trying to blow smoke up your backside, but you're sort of the dean of this, right? You've been doing this now. Me and you met years ago, and you were already on the track of being this truth teller. and sort of using this facts-based or data-based way of actually getting information across. And that's what Chris Krebs did. And I think what Amy and I saw, and I think what you've seen, is that this is the very retribution campaign that he said he was going to do. And I think a lot of people just need to listen to what he says. What really was surprising, Chris, it's still surprising, but even Miles Taylor was surprising.
Right.
You know, when you have a chief of staff, right, who actually gets hit because he wrote a letter, the anonymous letter in the book. But I think, Charlie, what scares me is that everybody involved with J6 using data and facts are being attacked from somebody who believes in fantasy. It would be like him calling an investigation for Chris Krebs because he was mad that Gandalf the Grey got killed in Lord of the Rings, right? It's that fantastical. So I'm not quite sure how we actually react to this type of retribution. Yeah, it's just antagonist. It's just retribution, but it's also sort of autocratic nuttery doing this. And I think people need to bow up on this pretty hard.
Yeah, and the other thing that
he's actually trying to criminalize belief in the validity of the election. I'm sorry, Amy, go ahead.
No, I was just going to make the point that it's not just an attack on two individuals. The president also, in the memorandum, attacked the company that Chris Krebs works for now. And what he said was, we're going to withhold security clearances from anyone who works for that company. So it's bigger than just those two individuals. He's going after people that work with those individuals now as retribution. And I just think that is just so un-American, and people need to know that. It's not just one or two individuals. This has broader implications.
Well, and he's going after the law firm, the big law firms, if they have any sort of association with anybody he doesn't like, or they've been engaged in litigation that he disapproves of. And I guess what is, I think, discouraging somewhat is the fact that I think all of these things are completely illegal, or they're unconstitutional. If the targets challenge them in court, they would win. But you are seeing one institution, one company after another caving into all of this, because I guess they're looking around saying, hey, you know what, if this big law firm isn't going to fight, why should I fight it? This requires collective action, right, Amy? I mean, this requires people to collectively say, okay, whatever your politics, you cannot use the weapons of the federal government to come after individuals who criticize you or you didn't like. Chris Krebs is just a professional, or try to destroy businesses who are associated with people you don't like, right? I mean, there needs to be a collective action, but we're not seeing that, are we?
No, I mean, when Amy was talking about them going after the companies also, when you're talking about the security clearances and you're talking about the law firms, Charlie, that's what me and Amy sort of touched on. I think that's what you're getting at too, is that who is going to protect people like Chris Krebs, Miles Taylor, other J6 individuals, people who are faxed and data-based, who are going to be people that bow up. And I think at this point, Charlie, I don't know who that's going to be. I think we have the Mark Eliases of the world, the Mark Zades of the world. I think they will. Mm-hmm. But other than that, when you look at some of these big firms, I think they're so cowed. And Charlie, I don't know where you stand on this, but I'm almost to a point, I'm not quite sure why there's so much cowardice and sort of this contraction of people who said that the law was the most important thing in their life. I'm being a little bit, maybe not trying to be facetious, that, there's lawyers out there that are good and bad. But at what point do we say enough is enough and actually bow up on this type of behavior, which is, to me, you're right, it looks illegal and criminal.
Yeah, just one couple of comments on Chris Krebs, because I want to get to that question. Philip Bump wrote about this in the Washington Post, and I radically agree with him when he says this is one of the worst things that Trump has done. It was it was as explicit a manifestation of Trump's vengeful worldview as anything that we have seen since his second inauguration. There remains no evidence at all that this organization or Krebs engaged in any systematic effort to violate the law or even to combat disinformation because of ideology rather than factuality. And of course, Liz Cheney put out that tweet where she said, in a special mix of incompetence and evil, Trump has combined his disastrous implementation of 1930s tariff policies with Stalin-esque targeting of political adversaries. The 2020 election was not stolen, and speaking the truth is only a crime in country ruled by tyrants. So in answer to your question, I think people are caving in because they think that Donald Trump will destroy them, that he's serious about destroying them, and that nobody will stand in his way. I mean, right now there is that sense that Donald Trump, whatever the poll numbers say, we can get to that. He feels he has the wind at his back. He's all out of bleeps to give. and people don't trust the system. They don't trust the courts. They don't trust independent agencies. So they are genuinely terrified of crossing Donald Trump, which is the kind of thing that only exists in, I'm sorry to use the word, in tyrannies.
Yeah. I mean, you're seeing it in law firms. You're seeing it in this case, a cybersecurity company, going after these companies. I actually think that some of that fear is also in our U.S. military right now.
Yeah.
With the inability, being terrified of standing up and even having some sort of counter opinion, even in private, could get you fired. I mean, this is, we're in an unprecedented place.
Well, that is true, though. I mean, the thing is, it is interesting that Donald Trump, of all the institutions that he's targeted, went, to the Department of Justice, wanted to weaponize it, put his most deplorable loyalists there, but he's clearly also really fixated on getting control of the military. I mean, really, and to say that there are frightening implications of that is putting it way too mildly. He's clearly, wanted to put a yes man in charge by appointing Pete Hegseth. He has been purging generals, purging the Joint Chiefs of Staff, making it very clear that if you do criticize them, you are out. Just fired the head of that base in Greenland for, getting JD Vance mad. But talk to me about this, because one of the big questions I always have is, we have these institutional norms and these traditions and all the laws that, will, prevent the military from being abused. But what happens when push comes to shove? Donald Trump wants to make the U.S. military an instrument of his personal power. Can he do it?
I think he already
No,
has.
I want to hear it. Okay.
I think he already has.
Oh, no.
And
I mean, when the guns are pointed in a certain way, I'm getting dark here. I mean,
you're getting real dark. You're going down the line. Are we going to invade Greenland? Right?
He has well, okay. He's already invoked the the Alien War Act or whatever. He's itching to invoke the Insurrection Act. Yeah, I mean, one dark scenario is invading Greenland. The other is actually using the military as an instrument of his own personal power in this country. I mean, so Amy, I've been told over and over again, don't worry about that. Men and women in uniform, they swear an oath. They know that they cannot, obey an unlawful oath. But of course, he got rid of all the lawyers who will tell them that. So we have the culture, we have the tradition, we have the norms, and then we have the fear and the fact that he's the commander in chief.
Right.
Give me some hope here.
Well,
if there is any,
I'll give you the reality. I do think there's hope. There is hope, and I'll start with that. The military is filled with amazing professional people who do love this country and do swear an oath to the Constitution, and most of them, including all the leadership, understand that. That said, we are in unprecedented territory because, as you stated before, a lot of the stuff that the way the military has run is based on norms. You would think that it was laws, but it's really not laws. It's norms. And the norms have not been tested the way Donald Trump is testing them. For example, the firing of the lawyers is a big deal because in the military, you have to obey lawful orders. It doesn't say you need to resign and go against unethical orders. It says you have to obey lawful orders. So if you make those orders lawful by having the JAGs interpret the order to, I don't know, shoot the protesters in the legs, then down the chain of command, technically you have to obey that. Now, we also have the laws of war. So when it comes to external fights, we are sort of managed by the laws of war. But internally, the United States military is not typically used in our country.
Nothing's typical anymore.
And those norms have not been. They're kind of gray. They're kind of mushy, and that is where I'm concerned.
Okay, that's pretty alarming. So Denver, One of the things I think that we ought to take away from the last couple of weeks is that, it is time to take Donald Trump seriously. All the things that you thought in the back of your mind that he might do, that people say, oh, he's joking about this, don't take him literally. Yeah, I think we need to take him literally. I mean, he's willing essentially to trash the world economy based on his obsessions. So when he jokes about having another term in office, or invoking the Insurrection Act or whatever, when he starts referring to the military as my military,
well,
we got to believe him. Yeah.
Yeah, we have to. I think the one thing that when you let up, and remember, Charlie, me and you talked right around January 6th too, if you remember, right after that.
Oh,
and,
yeah, very well.
Back in the day, when we thought maybe sanity would actually win at some point.
Yeah.
But everything he said he was going to do, he's been doing. And that was one of the things we talked about when we were on the committee. But even, and I was on the floor before January 6th, I said, the play is being directed at us. There's no real hiding on what they're thinking about the stolen election and what their strategies are. But when you look at Tim Hawk, right, when he got rid of Derns, the director of NSA, I met Tim when he was a colonel, Charlie, right, in 06. Yeah. A guy of incredible integrity. So when you're talking about sort of turning the military forces against American citizens, you're talking about the Insurrection Act. Amy and I did many tabletop exercises where we talked about what the Insurrection Act would look like if that actually happened here in the United States. But the people that are choosing to lead these agencies, you talked a little bit about Kash Patel, Charlie, which I know is a very close friend of yours. Just kidding. Yeah. But also when you're
tight.
Yeah. Like, are you tight? I know you're tight, Charlie.
Yeah.
But how about Tulsi Gabbard at DNI? What's going on there, right, Charlie? How about Pete Hegseth, as you talked about? You have literally people wild-eyed crazies that are trying to direct or actually listening to Donald Trump and downflowing that crazy into the ranks. And I just don't know where we go from there. If the Insurrection Act is employed, what do we do about a new NSA with loyalists as Dernza and deputy director? And what do we do about a DNI with somebody like Tulsi Gabbard, right, who's saying some of the craziest things right now, especially about why is Tulsi Gabbard talking about getting rid of electronic voting and going to paper ballots? What is happening, right? We got
exactly what you'd expect if you fill the cabinet with people like this. The only thing that I'm surprised by at this point is that Laura Loomer is not secretary of something. I mean, you basically made a list. Honestly, see, I bet you and I, the three of us, we could have had a bourbon sitting around in October saying, okay, so if Trump gets elected, let's have a contest of who can come up with the most bizarre list of cabinet members. I don't think we would have come close. I would have said Kash Patel for FBI, Tulsi Gabbard for DNI, Pete Hegg. You guys would have laughed. You would have said, okay, we're cutting Charlie off.
Charlie,
he has to switch to light beer or something. But we wouldn't come up with any of this.
Oh, God.
It's just by the way, okay, speaking of the military, I wanted to bounce one thing off you. And sometimes there are these stories that are substantively important, but you just can't get to them. So the Republicans are moving ahead with the budget, which we can come back to. We've gone through all of these budget cuts, for DOGE, the slashing of federal workers, the slashing of aid programs. I mean, there's blood, real human cost. And yet apparently now Elon Musk has gotten around to saying, I'm not going to save $1 trillion. I'm not going to save any of that. And plus then Republicans in Congress say, well, yeah, basically, fuck savings anyway. We're going to blow up the deficit, with the tax cuts. Yeah. We really didn't mean any of that. But if you pretend, let's just, that Republicans are still, putting on the fiscal conservative clown suit, and they're pretending to care about fiscal conservatism, then how are they justifying the $100 million military parade for Donald Trump's birthday?
$1 trillion.
Yeah, no. $100 million military parade and the $1 trillion budget. Yeah.
Oh, right.
Yeah, yeah, that's right. Yeah, go ahead, Amy.
Yeah, well, okay. I mean, there's two things. I mean, one thing, yes, we're gonna jack up the military budget to $1 trillion, which is a big increase. But I guess just more tangibly, if you're going through unnecessary expenditures, and I understand there are unnecessary expenditures, I'm just imagining and having cut all this, we're going to have a $92 to $100 million military parade in Washington on the day that just happens to be Donald Trump's birthday. I mean, first of all, Amy, just give me your reaction.
Well, look, we can spare no expense to help with Donald Trump's vanity. I mean, and that's what this is, right? If you can put millions of dollars in a flyby for NASCAR and, you know, all that stuff, that's all Donald Trump, you know, praising Donald Trump. So,
Yeah.
and in their mind, that should be like separate from the budget. But the $1 trillion military budget is actually really interesting because for me, it's this Pete Hegseth, very, in my view, unqualified junior officer way of thinking, in my view, of lethality, which seems to be his focus. Let's make America make American military lethal again. Well, you know what? The American military has always been lethal, very lethal. What we need to be is strategic, and what we need to be is resilient. And he doesn't seem to be focused on that. And so when you look at the $1 trillion idea of for the first time, we're going to have a military budget that's over $1 trillion. Isn't that going to make us wonderful? Meanwhile, you've gutted the other elements of national power that help our military achieve strategic objectives, like USAID, like the Voice of America, like our diplomats in the State Department. General Mattis, who is Secretary Mattis, then became secretary, 50 years of experience in national security affairs, has said, in terms of USAID, if you do not fund these people, we have to buy more bullets. Mm-hmm. It's very simple. And Pete Hegseth does not understand that. And Donald Trump doesn't understand any of it. But he's being advised by people who, in my view, have never risen past the rank of thinking tactically. They're in the fighting holes. They've done some shooting, but they don't know how to win the wars. They don't know how to achieve our objectives strategically. And this is just an example of that.
This is very, very interesting because I agree with you that they have no concept of soft power as a thing, that they actually think of it kind of as offensive. But let's put this in the context of what's happening economically as well. So Donald Trump has started a tariff war. He blinked somewhat, but is now playing this extraordinary game of chicken with China. And right now, as we're talking, they seem to be doing this ratcheting up on who can get to 200% faster. Meanwhile, almost all of our allies, our NATO allies, have been threatened, alienated, insulted. We're kind of alone. At some point, that also has national security implications as well, right? Because right now, I mean, America's place in the world feels fundamentally different than it did just a few years ago.
Well, I think I was in Ukraine in September, heading back, and I think when you're talking about the ripple effects of fantasy-based policy, you're looking at what's happening right now in Ukraine and how Poland is blown up. This is one of Amy's actually big concerns, right? Is Poland already has announced, like, maybe we need nuclear weapons if the United States isn't going to actually come at us, right? South Korea, right? And then you're looking up north to the Baltics, right? We know that there's 7 countries that surround Ukraine, right? One of them being Poland, but we even have places like Moldova, which we were trying to actually integrate with, and we crushed them with tariffs. And, it's just amazing to me how short-sighted this policy is based on hubris and arrogance and really a lack of understanding on how the global nuanced situation is integrated in everything we do as a global power. I think what also gets to me, and Charlie, I think you were mentioning this when you're talking about tariffs, soft power, the combination of how we're alienating our allies, the fact that that's going to push people maybe into getting their own nuclear programs. And again, Amy teaches this, right, as a professor. And now you're looking at proliferation. You're looking at the loss of the security apparatus. All of this stuff is actually intertwined. And that's why you need serious people in charge. And Charlie, you said something at the beginning. And I want to go back to it. The reason that I'm all out of fucks to give, and I think Amy is too, is because we care so much. I think you get to a point when you're looking at what's happening when with both of our military backgrounds, the fact that we've been at the highest level, either serving in government or running for offices that are incredible. When you have the background that you have, right, of 2 individuals that have seen this through the military, the national security apparatus, the congressional apparatus, what's happening in the academic apparatus, what's happening, as Amy has seen, in the academies, all of this is connected. And if we don't have people that want to protect the Constitution and are all out of fucks to give, where do we even go, Charlie? But
Yeah.
where do we even go? Podcasts or this alternative media that we're doing or we're trying to do. Again, tariffs, alienating our allies, alienating Ukraine, being pro-Putin. What happens in the South China Sea now with China? What happens if we do give up a broker deal in Ukraine? What happens then? What do our allies think? What happens? Just what happened? What happens when South Korea, China, and Japan do their own trade deal outside the United States, which just happened? Now we're seeing an alienation that's going to take decades for us to fix.
Yeah, the only thing I'll add, Charlie, to that is I think we tend to overlook the human side of national security. We tend to focus on how many tanks do we have, how many planes do we have, how many, how big is our military and our budget and all of these things. Here's the bottom line. When you have the vice president and the secretary of defense routinely shitting on our allies and partners around the world, whether it deals with security, but in this recent one, it's dealing with trade, and our own president treating our long-standing partners and allies in trade so poorly, it will absolutely have ramifications in the security and intelligence world. People are human. When a country does something to your country, boy, how patriotic do you just want to give them the big middle finger, right? And you might work for the Ministry of Defense in that country. Guess what? It's going to have ramifications on our security ties to all these other countries. And you know what? I hate to bring somebody in who is now banned by the United States Naval Academy's library, but there's a very famous poet writer by the name of Maya Angelou. And unfortunately, her book was just banned because of Pete Hegseth. But she's one of the favorite quotes that I've always remembered from her is, "No one remembers what you said. They remember how you made them feel." And when the United States is doing what we're doing in terms of trade to our longstanding allies and partners, it will have longstanding effects on our security commitments and our ties, which are so much a part of our power. Soft power is still power.
Soft power is still power. There's so much to unpack there, and I want us to start right there. When you lose, it's like personal relationships. When you lose trust, when you no longer think that person is your friend, that's hard to fix. Now, maybe nations will be differently, but I think the damage is long term here. But in terms of what you're talking about, in terms of our alliances, every grown-up, responsible grown-up in the last 50 years has understood that America is stronger with its allies, with its alliances. We're not strong because we have parades, we roll tanks down Pennsylvania Avenue. We're strong because we have other eyes, other people who are going to come to us. 2 points. To Denver's point about nuclear proliferation, do you agree, Amy? I don't know how you don't have countries like Poland going, well, we saw what happened when Ukraine gave up its nukes. We can't trust the United States anymore. We're not even sure we're on the same side anymore. We have existed under their nuclear umbrella. There's no way the United States is ever going to protect us. And Vladimir Putin, will not be deterred. So, of course, they're going to think about getting nukes. And secondly, we also have the eyes, the other intelligence agencies. I mean, they'd be crazy not to at least, close the door and go, do we really want to share, real sensitive information with these guys? I mean, it's got to have tremendous implications for those kinds of relationships. What do you think?
Well,
Amy?
first, I never want to share information with Tulsi Gabbard, for one.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Yeah.
But to the nuclear proliferation, this is really real. The Polish prime minister has already said that they should get a nuclear weapon. The majority of South Koreans, and South Korea, by the way, has the most nuclear reactors per capita than any country in the world. So it's not a big leap technologically for them. They could get a nuclear weapon in a matter of months.
I picked a bad week to drink water. Water during these. I am really.
Are you drinking water? Is that
choice.
water in that glass?
I am. It is actually really water. Yeah. I am really disappointed.
South
I am not
Korea,
drinking water, Charlie.
Japan, Germany, Germany is already in talks with the UK and France to try to get under their nuclear umbrella. They typically don't provide a nuclear umbrella. Why? Because they don't have enough nukes. We have most of the nukes. So all of these countries have been under our umbrella. And when you have Donald Trump as the president, they're all looking and saying, we can't trust the United States anymore. And speaking of water, and this is the last thing I'll say on this, once the dam breaks and one of these countries gets nukes, guess what? They're all going to get them. They're all going to get it. Turkey, Saudi Arabia, Japan, South Korea, Germany, Poland.
Why not? Why wouldn't they?
Now, for if anyone's still listening to us after this,
what you think they're running through the woods like it's just no clothes, completely just I have no reason to live.
So on this subject, does anyone in the world think that Donald Trump would go to war to defend Taiwan or would be a credible defender? And I wonder with this trade war with China, I was driving, listening to some of the commentary, and this random thought occurred to me. I could see Donald Trump just trading Taiwan in a nanosecond for some trade chip with President Xi, who's basically taking him to the cleaners. Because everything in the world is transactional for Donald Trump, and Taiwan is a chip with China. We're involved. What do you think about? Is that fair?
I think it is fair.
Crazy?
I think that's why Japan is starting to bow up a little bit themselves, right, Charlie? Is that they're like, can we really count on the United States right now, right? And do we need to look to South Korea? And by the way, maybe we have to worry about our own trade issues with China and possibly, right, with the South China Sea and the enemies there, right? Maybe it's time for us to have a good relationship with China. So, okay, interesting. Sort of take us out of the loop. Now you have Taiwan. I think Trump would leave Taiwan hanging in a heartbeat. And I think he would actually declare it as a victory, right? One of the greatest geopolitical victories in the history of the United States. We're not going to war for China over Taiwan because we gave it up, because we got free trade with China, and we got what he wants is reparations, trade reparations. And we got that too. So look how great I am. But again, first of all, I think we would find out about it on Signal before anything, Charles, right? Charlie, I think we'd find out about it because I think the only thing that he's doing right now is he's probably signaling Kim Jong-un for parade tips, right, when it comes down to what Donald Trump wants to do with the military. So, but again, I don't think anything is out of play. And again, I hate to go back to the beginning of the conversation. He's done what he says he's going to do. He has been completely blunt. There isn't any nuance to Donald Trump. He has said exactly what he's going to do. The people that he has chosen are going to follow what he's going to do. And we have people that will execute those orders without regards to legalities. And I think that's where we're at, Charlie. I just think we need to say, hey, this is where we're at. Just accept the reality of the situation.
And I think that there's been a failure of imagination about what he's going to do, what's going to happen. I actually remember, not blowing smoke to you, Denver, but I remember you were writing in the days before January 6th that you were picking up all of these signs and all of these signals, and it's going to be really, really bad. I mean, you put it out there as a record, and everybody was like, "Well, how bad could it get? It's going to be fine." It's just I kind of feel we're in that moment. And by the way, you were being snarky when you talked about getting the tips from Kim Jong-un for the parade.
For the parade,
literally. For the parade, literally, look, Donald Trump is going to sit down with Pete Hegseth and he's going to show him pictures. I want it to look like this. I want to look like Red Square. I want to look like and I'm guessing somebody's going to give him a picture of all of these, North Korean missiles. I want bigger missiles. I want more missiles.
He's probably going to ask fans to get the Kim Jong-un haircut to sit next to him. Like it's insane, It's insane, Charlie.
Okay, so since this has been really heavy, can we talk about something light and fluffier? Like,
sure.
Whiskey.
Yeah, like, okay, so
it's Amy drinks. It's going to be a great podcast, Charlie.
We're going light here, okay? If it's okay with you guys, what's wrong with the Democratic Party, Amy? I mean, you're a Democrat, right?
Wow.
No,
Damn,
I mean,
Charlie,
come on,
off the top rope.
I mean, really, Why is it that they have taken? I mean, you feel they're getting a little bit of mojo going, but it's like they had no idea what was coming. So just come on, straight talk.
And look, I'm not a political strategist. I always tell people I'm just an old Marine.
You've been there. You've been in the trenches.
I
Yes,
have.
she has.
And I always said, with regards to sort of running in really red states, you're not just running that for that cycle. You're running against many years, and in my case, decades of branding of Democrats as, weak, terrible, the Antichrist, whatever, and so it's hard. Okay. And so I don't want to.
That was Denver's campaign literature back in.
That was
Virginia.
come on. I told the
just so you know,
right here,
okay, all right.
It's hard. It's hard. No. I do think that there needs to be a new generation of leaders, and obviously in both parties, but also in the Democratic Party. I know that's sort of like nobody wants to hear that, but I think there's a lot of good, solid patriots within the Democratic Party. I'm talking Alyssa Slotkin, Mikey Sherrill, Abigail Spanberger, Jason Crow,
great list.
Pat Ryan. I think these folks, I would love to see them sort of move up a little bit.
Hey, but I'm being told by all the cool kids that AOC is the future. That it's going to be Bernie and AOC. That all you Democrats need is just a little bit more of that AOC juice. What do you think?
Well, when I hear that, and it's nothing really against AOC or Bernie. They have their own following. But here's the facts. There's been no swing district in this country, no purple district that has ever been won by a far left candidate. Ever.
Fact.
So so if you're going to look at how do you get power back, what is the path to getting power back? You have to look at those districts. That's the path. And that is, you have to have candidates and a message that appeals to those districts. And I'm not quite sure that going further left, which is what people accused me of not doing enough of, is the way to go.
So people told you that you should have become more left-wing in Kentucky.
Oh yeah.
Because
no, I definitely got that. I'm not left enough. I'm too vanilla. I'm too milk toast is what they call milk toast. I'm not a far enough left. The funny thing about that, Charlie, is I ran on the exact same policy platform in 2018 when I ran for Congress as I did in 2020. But in 2018, I had a different primary opponent than I did in 2020. Yeah. In 2018, I ran against somebody who was more moderate in the primary. So therefore, I was considered further left. In 2020, I ran against a primary opponent who was much further left to me. So then I was considered moderate milk toast. But the funny thing is I didn't change anything. It's just the perception.
Okay.
Charlie, can a former Republican answer this? Are you ready?
Well, we do this on this podcast every day, so yes. So
I know. I was just being so facetious. But here's the thing. Yeah. If I can sum it up. If Bernie and AOC are the standard bearers for the Democratic Party, it's going to be generational losses and difficulties for the Dems. It's that simple. They if those are the standard bearers, they're screwed.
Why?
Why? Because
but they're fighting back, and a lot of other people aren't. That's what I'm hearing, right?
I love it. I'm glad they're fighting back. I'm glad they are. But where are the actual? It's almost like we have to make America sane again. We talked about, the GOP and the Democrats. Here's how I sort of, we have a party that vacillates, right? And we have a party that's insane, right? Like it's lost rationality on every level. When Amy's talking about this sort of back and forth, I've been asked to run as a Democrat, Charlie. I mean, and Amy knows this, right? So this is not known that this is just us right now. It's just us friends talking. I'm sure nobody will hear this, right? Because there's only thousands and thousands that listen to your podcast, Charlie. But
we'll keep it between us.
Okay, can we please? But here's what I asked. I said, can you guarantee that the far left, come on, if I'm going against somebody in the 5th District of Virginia like a John McGuire who took selfies at J6, can you guarantee that the far left will get on the bandwagon of somebody like me? And they're like, well, we think so. There's no way, because they can't get out of their tribal thinking. And so when you're looking at Bernie and AOC are the ones fighting, that's great, but they're not fighting on the playing field that the vast majority of middle America actually stands on. They just don't even know what's going on there. People can fight on a progressive side when you're looking at the insanity of the far right that's in a hold my beer moment and they're sniffing glue or whatever they're doing. That's fine. Fight. Bring it to the front. But there's not going to be a Bernie candidate that wins in Virginia too. There's not going to be a Bernie candidate that actually wins where Amy's. It just isn't going to happen. The problem that we have is that the far right is so mobilized in fantasy, conspiracy theories, and ridiculousness that we almost need this overwhelming. It's not even the middle anymore, Charlie. It's not the center. It's not moderates. And if I may humbly submit, it's the rational. And the rational need to be very confrontational. We need to be assholes. And we need to go right into it. And I think that's the only way to do it. So I need Jason Crow out there getting tens of thousands of people. That's who I need out there getting tens of thousands of people right now. And he could do it, right? It's great that AOC and Bernie are mobilizing a fringe portion of the party, 20 to 30%, not really fringe, but the other side. But we need to find that 50 to 60% middle slice, and we need to smack on them and get rationality out there and be confrontational and go right at them just like the nuts do. That's, again, humbly submitted.
Disarray is a problem that the Democrats have had to wrestle with, but I think delusion is much more dangerous than disarray, and I do worry about the bubbles. I'm on Blue Sky. I actually like Blue Sky, but there are sometimes you can find yourself in a bubble where people don't understand how what you're saying sounds to the voters who will determine who controls America. Do you know what I'm saying? I mean, it's like, okay, this makes sense among us, and you bounce it back and forth, and it becomes, sure, let's defund the police. Let's have absolutely open borders. And, why not have taxpayer funding for transsexuals and all of those things? Check them all on the box, and then are surprised when they turn them into hundreds of millions of dollars of ads. And so I do worry that there are these bubbles. I don't mean to pick on Blue Sky. I'm a contributor to MSNBC, but Amy, you know what I'm talking about? The MSNBC thing where, I've been doing that for years, and I've never been asked to even talk about certain questions like, hey, there's another point of view out here, or you understand that if you walk into, a truck stop in Wausau and you say what you just said is the winning formula, you'd be laughed out of the room. So part of that is, how do you get the names you mentioned I think are exactly the kinds of people who are the future of the opposition, because first of all, they win elections. They win elections not in Burlington, Vermont, or Berkeley, California, or Madison, Wisconsin. They win elections in states where they're not supposed to win. You have Democrats that win in Kentucky, but they sound different, don't they?
Yeah, they're more practical. They understand the things that would trigger people too. They're more savvy with how they talk about certain things. And Jared Golden is another example in Maine. A lot of them end up come from the veteran community. We're sort of we see it all. And Denver and I, when we do our show, it's one of the things we want to really focus on is not just being in a silo and sort of repeating maybe even Democratic talking points, but really looking at what is the other side saying? Is there merit to what the other side's saying? And if there is, let's talk about it. If it's just bullshit, let's also talk about it. And
that's
why.
Hard, isn't it? Isn't that hard, though? This is interesting that you say that, because I really struggle against that, because at a certain point, because the divisions are so deep and the stakes are so high, you don't want to say the worst person in the world just made a good point. You just really don't want to do it. And there's also that tendency, and I think the never Trump right fell into it, which is that, because anything Trump is for, we're against, and, you make any sort of alliances to begin to adopt not just, center right positions, but, just, keep moving to the left. In other words, no longer providing an ideological critique, and then before you know it, you're all sounding alike, and you're actually nodding, Amy, about this, because you've seen this phenomenon, right? Yeah.
It's interesting you say that, because on our show we've done a couple episodes already, and we've been very, very, very critical of Donald Trump and his administration, and rightfully so. Yeah. However, one of the things I was going to throw at Denver for next week, and he doesn't even know this yet, was I was going to challenge him to be like, hey, we need to do a segment on what the Trump administration is doing right. Ooh. And I know you're shaking your head, because there's not much. And you know what? He's far outweighed by all of the crap that he's doing. So there's like nothing in my mind that he's doing that would compare to even make that even. But I have something in mind that I want to talk about that I think he's doing right. And I wanted to challenge Denver to try to come up with something. I don't know if he can, but like, that is the sort of thing we still need to continue to talk about.
I think ideas poorly executed. I can come up with things that I think that maybe when you're talking about tariffs or you're talking about defense spending, especially in Charlie, I mean, and Amy, I'm not going to be geeky, but looking at the approach process or the NDAA process, the line process, right, where I think that some of the ideas might have had some merit, but maybe the execution is so insane that even a sane idea gets completely contorted and twisted, as you're going down the line. So I think that's part of it, right? Is that I think that's probably where we need to go. I think, in doing this show, but Charlie, why we wanted to talk to you too, is that I don't know. You said something about the left and the right, how we do a show where you're just not looking at the insanity of the right? Because crazy is not party specific. It's just the Republicans that are in a hold my beer moment. But the question, Charlie, and why, Amy and I wanted to be here, you seem to have been able to metastasize sanity in a way that other people can't. So, in a small way, how do you metastasize sanity rather than 9/11 truthers or January 6th election deniers or people who believe in alien abductions or that Bigfoot is their spirit guide, right? How do you get out of that, right? How do you get up that line? But also when you're looking at people who go really far left or far right on these podcasts, my question is, how do you monetize sanity? Right? How do you get the funding, right, to actually monetize sanity and rationality when that's not part of the funding cycle when it comes to far left and far right, and how entrenched they are in those tribalistic positions?
Okay, this is a huge sort of inside thing, because there is a lot of audience, capture, fan service that goes on, and sometimes I'll look at some of the things that are out there and going, you're afraid to go anywhere, anywhere different. So I mean, you're going to find out that, one of the reasons why we have these alternative reality bubbles is because people want them. They want a safe space. They want to hear what they want to hear. I mean, seriously. And one of the things that I'm really struggling to do, and I think you're probably going to struggle to do it as well, I just want to warn you about this. There are conversations that are difficult that have to take place. Like, what do the Democrats have to learn from 2024? I did a podcast the other day, about one of the new books about the election, why the Democrats lost, why Trump won.
Saw that.
What should, should Biden have dropped out? What do we not know about Biden's age? And there was a huge amount of blowback. Like, why are we even talking about this? Why are you bashing Democrats? Why are we beating a dead horse? And it's like, I don't really want to engage, but this would be like the coach of a football team that just got blown out saying, I'm not looking at any of that tape. I'm not either, we're not going to talk about we're just, I get that. But also there's a downside to denial and to delusion. And sometimes you have to go back and you have to do that difficult thing. You have to have the autopsy. You have to say, okay, I got to tear the scab off here. What did we do wrong? Because you don't want to do it again. I mean, if the goal is to get rid of these people, then actually winning elections is what it's about. You can't get away from that. And winning elections means talking to voters who are not necessarily all of them in that bubble. I know that's what I'm preaching to the converted here, but just for folks to understand, it is much harder than people think, because it's really easy to go far right and make a lot of money. It's real easy to go left and all woke and star fucking and make lots of money. It's really hard to say, hey, folks, can we just stay kind of sane?
It is hard, and it's a bit of an experiment, right? But to do something that what we're doing. But I'll say that I do think that there is a good amount of people who don't believe in sort of corporate media anymore, and they just want the truth. And they're not super far left or far right, but they can be swayed by things that just aren't true. I was down at last month. I was down at one of the town halls in Florida, for Florida One, which is where I used to live in Pensacola when I was stationed in flight school. So I went down there to do a town hall with the Democratic candidate, Gay Valamont, and she ended up losing that election. But she won Escambia County, by the way, which was Pensacola, which hadn't happened since 1992, which is pretty amazing. But the town hall was packed, and we had a lot of questions. One guy who was there as a Democrat, like as an independent, he raises his hand and says, "Why? Tell me, Amy, you know a little bit about aviation and stuff. Why did Joe Biden leave the astronauts up in space? Why didn't he bring them back? Why did he couldn't?" I mean, the guy had clearly just read this on some decentralized conspiracy theory.
Tell me what the answer was for people who are watching us who are like, "Yeah, well, I was wondering that."
Well, there was this far right conspiracy, and Denver could probably talk about it because he lives in these circles.
Damn, I'm so in tune with nuttery.
Left the astronauts in space on purpose. These astronauts that were up there, it was some mechanical problems that we couldn't get them back to Earth in the right amount of time. They were actually up there for many, many months because of safety. We wanted to get them home. And we could resupply them, but we wanted to make sure that we got them home safely. And of course, in that time frame, Charlie, we had an inauguration of another president, and so the conspiracy is that Joe Biden didn't want them to come home. They, left them to dry, and this guy believed it. And so you have to counter that stuff, because you can just laugh. We're all laughing here, but people believe
I'm dying
that
inside.
And that's we have to be out there, and in this day and age, policy platforms, media platforms are almost as important as policy platforms. And that's what I would say about, the 2024 election too. We need to be out there within a relationship with people with sanity prior to election years.
Well, I think, we live in an attention economy, and there's so much competition for attention, but I also think that that there is also a trust economy, and that people are looking for people that they can trust. One of the reasons why they are leaving the corporate media is they no longer trust them. And the question that I get all the time is, can I believe this person? Can I believe that person? Who do I listen to? And so I think that there is a great churn out there of people who are looking for trusted voices. So maybe that's the answer, Denver, for what the model is. Find the audience that wants someone to trust, that may think you're full of shit on something, but at least knows you're giving it to them straight.
Yeah. It's hard not to trust me. First of all, I've told so many people things they don't want to hear. I don't know what else to say, because it's very difficult to go against a guy who the left accused of being a Bigfoot eroticist Nazi, and the right accused of the tool of the Antichrist being funded by George Soros and the general of the sodomite armies. So I have been, I don't know, Charlie, first of all, listen, I think first of all, being a Nazi and general of the sodomite armies would be mutually exclusive. Just a guess, right? So I think also with what happened with January 6th, I think that people do know that people were so pissed off on the right and the left, but I'm so data driven. And I think Amy was in the middle of hell going against Mitch McConnell and Andy Barr, right? Where she's on stage crushing debates, and everybody's like, no, we would rather nuttery. And she got hit on so many sides, and she can tell you those stories sometime over bourbon, Charlie. And I think what you have are two people that really are out of F's to give. I think we are, because we know you have to be there in order to make a difference. And as far as the Democrats and Republicans, a great thing about intelligence analysis is that past performance is indicative of future performance. So when people come up and tell me, Trump, oh my God, he's crazier than I thought. I'm like, really? Are you really? Or they're like, oh my God, the Democrats lost again. Really? Really? Yeah. Are you kidding? So I think that's where we're at, is we're at the really stage with people like, oh, why can't AOC and Bernie be the zeitgeist of the Democratic Party? Or, oh my gosh, Trump, I didn't think he was going to be this crazy. I voted for him. I should have voted for Harris because now I've lost $10 million in my business and I can't get corks, right? So you're like, okay, there's not much more we can do. So Amy and I are going to drag an axe into battle, and we're going to look across the field and we're going to look at each other just like you do, Charlie, every day. And like, this is going to suck. And a lot of people are going to hate us, but maybe, just maybe 1 to 3% of the population will come our way.
Okay. So I just want to remind you, as we wrap this up, Denver and Amy, that we just have to remind ourselves that we are not the crazy ones. And this is how I end every one of my podcasts. The reason we do this is to remind ourselves, because people are out there watching the insanity and thinking, okay, is it just me? And I think that's the point of my podcast. It's the point of your new podcast, which is Truth in the Barrel. You can find it every Sunday. The point is that, those people are full of it, but we are not the crazy ones. Amy, Denver, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you, Charlie.
All right, thanks.